Hello, and welcome to Barriers to Healing. I'm Lisa, and I'm joined by Carol Banens, and we are gathering here today to talk about barriers to healing. This is our third live stream in a series of four, and we're really looking at things that get in the way of our healing and what we can do about them. So, our time together is intentionally brief because we want to tackle these things little by little. Grief can be extremely overwhelming, so we're going to break this down today as we look at barriers to healing, specifically physical barriers today. I do want to introduce Carol Banens, who, after losing her husband about 6 years ago, dedicated her life. She had formerly been a physical therapist and decided on her own healing path that she would turn her attention not only toward her own healing, but toward helping others. So she became certified as a grief educator and a grief coach. She's also a published author of 3 books, now available on Amazon. A beautiful book of poetry called Kintsugi Your Heart, and 2 other great and very helpful books about self-care during the grief process. Just some very basic and easy to go to ways that we can take care of ourselves when we're healing. And if I haven't met you, I'm Lisa McFarland, and I too had a former life where I was working first in the pediatric IU nursing world and then moved into our corporate career that I eventually walked away from in my own pursuits of trying to heal and also dedicating my time and energy to hopefully helping others heal as well. I too have a book on Amazon called The Healing Path. The first in a series of 3 is called Part 1, Stay Present. And we will be giving a little information at the end of our chat on how to connect with us should you be interested in doing so. So welcome, Carol. Welcome to our other participants that we are humbled and glad to have with us today. And Carol, if you want to say good morning before we jump in, that would be perfect.
Well, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you, Liz, and everybody who's joining us. Yeah, nice to be here.
Excellent. Excellent. So again, welcome. And where we're going to go this morning is we're looking at just a couple of physical barriers that can get in the way of our healing. And this one we really want to look at lifestyle, because there are a lot of things in our environment that can kind of get in our way. And we seem to come back to some of the similar themes as we have conversations each week. So a lot of this information may overlap, but all the more reason why it's valuable to have these chats, because it gives us a place to focus in our healing. So, Carol, in your
Mhm.
work with your clients, I wonder if you could just share some of the full barriers and some of the ways that specifically that lifestyle can really get in the way of our progress in healing.
Yeah. Well, physical barriers are interesting, aren't they? Because grief itself is such a challenging thing to go through that we go through a lot of physical issues. Immediately, we go through increased inflammation. We go through the lethargy of grief. We
Mm,
have a more propensity to get, bugs and viruses. We're tired. And so right away, just in the normal processing of grief, there's a physicality to it. And I don't think we realize that. And then in dealing with that, in trying to deal with our emotions, I think we can sometimes turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. And that's where I think we're going today. What is a barrier to our healing? Well, one of them we've talked about already is not feeling the emotions. I think one of the ways we put up a physical barrier to that is perhaps drinking too much,
mhm.
eating, and I did this. I had, instead of 1 glass, 2 or 3 glasses of wine. It kind of numbs you out. You feel a bit relaxed. But the problem with that is A, you're not dealing with your emotions, but B, it affects your sleep. And you might fall asleep, but then you wake up again. So it's not really a helpful coping strategy. We have eating, grief takes a lot of energy. We're trying to process what's happened. Our body is, our brain is, and it's very tiring. And so we're apathetic and we feel we just reach for some comfort food. I did that as well. And you start eating because it's easy, and maybe you eat some chips or a cookie or a biscuit for those in England and some cake, and you just eat the easy stuff or some pizza, and you forget about the nutrition. And that becomes a physical barrier in itself because you're not getting the energy from the nutrients your body needs to start processing your grief. And of course, both of those can lead to longer term issues, can't they? If you
Mhm.
start drinking a little extra, well, okay, for a little bit. But if you keep that going, can end up with problems. The same with eating. If you're eating too much and too much of the wrong stuff, you put on weight and then you have to deal with that on top of your grief. Or often people don't eat at all because
Mhm.
they just can't face food. They just can't do it and they lose a lot of weight. And again, they're not getting the nutrients they need. They feel more tired and then they don't move. And movement, we know, is really important. We know in general movement's important, isn't it? And in grief, we just are exhausted. We sit down and we don't want to move. And interestingly enough, this is interesting, inflammation, which is increased when we're grieving, can affect the way we think and our behaviors. And so we become more
Mhm.
apathetic. We're less likely to get up and move. And again, gives us more long-term problems. If we think of other physical barriers, it can just be your own health before the death of somebody. Are you somebody who's suffered with anxiety or depression? That's probably going to magnify in grief. And so these are things that can make it more difficult to move through. Lack of support. I know we're talking about dietary, but physical barriers are the things that stop us moving forwards. And they can be our surroundings. Are you surrounded by mess? Are you surrounded by people that can support you or who take from you? So many elements to this, aren't there, Lisa?
So many. And, you bring up the great point about moving into a period of recovery and healing after a loss. And you mentioned anxiety, and it brings to
Hmm.
mind when we're talking about physical barriers. And so this is my experience, but also questions. I'm curious
Hmm.
if this has been true in your own experience and with your clients, that whatever we sort of tend to go to relieve our stress or to manage difficult situations prior to some type of loss rising, that tends to be the thing that
Yeah.
will exacerbate. In other words, whatever bad habits we're into the party of grief and healing, those are probably going to give us the most trouble because we've already sort of indoctrinated
Yeah.
ourselves with we call it a drug of
My
choice.
my
Um,
go-to, right? My go-to comfort. Ooh, I'll eat a bit more. I'll drink a bit more. This'll because you know that that makes you feel better in the moment.
or at least we've been fooled into think that,
Right.
yeah, that had. Another thought that came to mind on nutrition is this idea of what food is in my food. And I love the question because we all know that, we eat garbage, or, if we're
Yeah.
responding to some craving or whatever it might be, that we can go through days, if not weeks, whether we're not eating anything, as you said, related to our experience, stress and
Hmm.
overwhelming grief. But also, we can go through long periods of time where we're not feeding our body any actual food,
Yeah.
things that are empty calories, like booze, like chips or
Pop,
pizza, or these
even
things.
soda
we
pop,
have
diet
to
pop. Yeah.
we have to ask ourselves, if we are reaching for those creatures of comfort, we also can help ourselves move through that physical barrier by asking ourselves this question on a regular basis: what food in my food, and making sure that there is some. So I guess where I'm with this is, we don't look to our grieving and our healing selves to be best, most optimal version of ourselves. And we get that. So no one's saying, don't dip your toe into the things that bring you comfort short term. But when it comes to food specifically, for example, maybe I do eat a lot of garbage, but at some point I find myself, oh, but I really use some nutrients. And maybe that's
Yeah.
not something good, and maybe we don't have the energy to make ourselves a nice meal. But if we're going to eat garbage, let's make sure that we get something nutritious also, whether
Yeah.
we go down in a restaurant or we, have an egg on toast or something that has nutritive value. Because again, these habits that we bring into the space of, devastation and pain tend to be the ones that get a little bit, a little bit or a lot way off
Out of whack.
balance. Certainly, in my own grieving journey, having lost two of my children as infants, my course over the last 20, 25 years, the weight fluctuates, different levels of engagement as far as moving my body, making sure I'm exercising, making sure I'm hydrated. But I
Yeah.
think that had to do with going into being a mom. I was already sort of had the training of being focused on food and weight and body and all those issues that particularly women, but I guess women and men go into as we evolve out of our youth. And so that's where it really shifted for me,
Yeah.
and I think that we have to be aware of those things and try to at least match some of those bad behaviors or unhealthy lifestyle habits as a physical barrier with something that can also benefit us and
Yeah.
help heal.
I think so. And I think, it's back to the basics, isn't it? It's food, it's nutrition, hydration, movement, and sleep. And just, it is a barrier to healing if you're not sleeping. And let's face it,
Amen.
grief can really, really affect your sleep. I mean, we know that even if you're not in grief and you have a few bad nights, you're not functioning very well and everything feels more difficult. Well, in grief, everything is already more difficult. And if you're not sleeping, it just adds another layer to that. So when you are getting good nutrition, when you're getting some movement, it actually is going to help you with your sleeping a little bit. And if you're not sleeping, and it is a barrier to healing, then don't have a long nap in the day to catch up because then it throws you off the next night. What I would suggest is, take some quiet time, maybe listen to some music, maybe a maximum half an hour nap, but put a timer on and don't have it
Mm,
in the afternoon. Just take quiet time. We have to, I think it comes back always to self-care, doesn't it, Lisa? Whatever the barrier is,
boy, it really
we
does.
talked about this. It's
Comes up
self-care
again and again.
again and
Darn it.
again. Prioritize your self-care. So, as Lisa said, if nutrition is a problem, maybe ask somebody to cook you some soup and put some extra food in the freezer.
Hmm.
Or buy some
Great
ready
idea.
prepared that's already real food. Don't just rely on the takeout. And I know it's hard, I know, but add a little bit of nutrition, a piece of fruit, a few carrots, something so that your body can support you, so that you're not creating a barrier within to healing, right?
That's
And it's
right.
so easy. We fall back on these comfortable habits that we have.
And again, just adding the piece, we thought this too, but let's just not judge ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not use it as an opportunity to create more stress and more judgment and more isolation. But I love some of these remedies that you're calling out. Talked about the nutrition part, but the sleep part is a massive lever. Why We Sleep. I think his name is Matthew Walker, the book that came out a couple of years ago. I hope I'm not jumbling that. I know the book is called Why Sleep. And what's fascinating about our rest, this is a whole other conversation that might be worth having. But when we look at our rest and our rest patterns, the way that things like rest or lack thereof, nutrition or lack thereof, hydration, moving the body, these things all work in concert. And when one is thrown out of whack, all of them necessarily are thrown out of whack. And again, we're not saying we don't want to jump on ourselves bad choices, but what we want to do is so try to balance out some of those reactive choices because we're struggling with our grief, particularly early on in the first couple months, even the first couple of years where we're getting our footing. If it's been a profound loss like a child or partner, it can take, I think you said in one of our other chats, somewhere around 5 or 6 years to
Uh,
really land on our
five,
feet.
it can take 5 to 8 years. And David Kessler says acute grief, he thinks of it as 2 years. Most people think you're over it by then. And of
Right.
course, we know we're never over it. But I think it just goes to show how much and how important self-care is if we have to sustain ourselves for those lengths of time.
And it can feel like a marathon. But
Hmm.
so for that first 2 years, we're definitely not judging ourselves in there, but little by little we want to start really be intentional about some of these choices. And in that way, as we go further out from our loss, and as we learn to layer in some of these things, what I personally have found is that in that way, grief and loss can actually become a ramp into a better quality of life in that way. I'm not saying the pain isn't there. The pain is always there. We're not trying to get rid of
Mhm.
the pain necessarily, although we want to find a way to integrate it, as we talk about a lot, into our lives. But at least if, for example, I have an eating disorder or I have a sugar addiction or whatever it might be, looking specifically at nutrition as an example, and I move into a difficult loss and I'm in a grieving phase, years out from that, I might actually find that that was an avenue for me to start paying attention to how I'm taking care of myself, start making some intentional choices about how to nourish my body and things. So, we've talked in the past about collateral beauty and some of the, which, for lack of a better word, that can kind of come out of this journey and path of trying to heal. And I think that's one of them. Some of our bad habits, when they're under a microscope, when trying to heal, can actually improve a little bit. And that can become kind of this secondary gift of, what doesn't feel like a gift at all, when we're really hurting.
I think what grief can do is throw up choices that perhaps we weren't open to before. So, as you say, perhaps I always turn to comfort food or bread or whatever it is, or a few glasses of wine. And perhaps in your grief, you can think, you know what, I'm not sure I want to live that way anymore. I'm going to choose to take care of myself better. But it's a
Mhm.
choice. And, there are so many choices open to us. Do we choose to stay where we are, just to stay in it and keep those barriers there so that we can't move forwards? And I think what we're saying, that the word integrate is such an important word. You'll always have your grief. You'll always have the love for the person that you lost. You'll always have these feelings. But to allow yourself to move forward, you have to support yourself. You
Mhm.
cannot rely on everybody else to do that for you for the next 5 to 8 years. That people can't
Yeah.
sustain that.
Because
And
also a lot of folks have their own, we
their
have
own
the world
lives.
doesn't stop when someone we love dies. It
Yeah.
keeps going, and people are present in the way that they can be, for as long as they can be. But I'd love to transition our chat now just
Mm.
into, because we're talking about self-care as one of the remedies for these physical
Yeah.
barriers. And the second one that I identified recently to kind of touch on today is this idea of learn to, if we're not already, listening to our body, listening to what body needs. And I guess because we have really been kind of talking about this as we're going, we might almost be able to skip right to, what are the remedies for not being able to hear our body? Like, how do we get better at hearing what is
Hmm.
needed at any given time?
Yeah. I listen, I always go back to the Tara Brach rain meditation because I don't think we know how to feel or tune in to our bodies because we've not been taught. And so when we can acknowledge and recognize that, I'm just going to go through it for people again. R is
Great.
recognize your emotion. I'm sad. Okay, acknowledge it. Allow it. I'm going to allow that sadness. Investigate it. And that's where you start to learn, how am I feeling it in my body? Wow, where do I feel that sadness? Gosh, it's tight in my chest, or I feel butterflies in my stomach, or my throat is tight. And you stay with it and you investigate, you get curious. Is it a shape? Is it a color? Is it a texture? It may or may not be. There's no right or wrong. I'm just telling you, but you get curious and then you nurture. Do you just put a hand on it? And it is so powerful to learn how to feel and sense the emotion in your body. That's one way. And I think it's one of the most helpful ways because it takes you through the how to do it in a beautiful, easy way to remember.
I love that, and I appreciate you bringing again. I will share, just if I can, a
Yeah.
personal experience I had earlier this week, where, and this still happens, just the overwhelm of grief, feeling what I would describe as just like a deflation, kind of undercurrent of um, flatness. And even as a person, myself, as I concentrate and I focus a lot on, healing and my own experience, I certainly talk with a lot of folks doing the same thing from whatever the loss have been, maybe a job or relationship, the loss of a pet, or even good health. As we look at these things, I'm very far out from the loss of my children, though I feel the longing and the ache of those losses still, that's my DNA at this point. But even for me, like the idea of going to the rain practice, the idea of sitting in that feeling, the very first, the letter in the acronym R, the recognize, um, to have courage and to I guess muster up the choice to stop what I'm doing and sit and say, okay, I recognize I'm not feeling too right now. Invest or acknowledge. What is it? It's recognize, acknowledge, right, and then
Investigate.
investigate. So that investigate is where I feel like I can get very overwhelmed, even as someone who I feel like I have a language for
Yeah.
what I'm experiencing. But I'm sharing this because I want our audience and our community to hear and to know that these are choices and challenges that are part of our evolution. They're not a one and done.
Hmm.
They're not a. I've now decided that when I don't feel like things are the way I want them to, I'm every time going to be able to stop and acknowledge and, kind of
Yeah.
investigate, and then I'm going to nurture and good. I'm go. These are
That's not how it
ongoing
works.
inquiries and choices. And I think one of the main goals of your and my collaboration in this series is really to try to invite, educate folks who may be feeling like, why am I not, back on my feet, or I should, be in a different place, or I should be able to stop and help myself. BS that, right? We want people to understand and to hear from people. I mean, you've lost your Brian now is it 6 years?
7 years, 7 years this year. My
Yikes.
mum took COVID, and brother-in-law, two brother-in-laws, and my sister. And
And your sister is a young person.
yes, and I think this is so
Yeah.
important, Lisa, what you're saying. It isn't a one and done, it is an ongoing practice. And if rain is too much, even and sitting quietly, I was just talking to a client, and I was just saying, sometimes we just need to sit for a moment quietly and just
Hmm.
do that. And that in itself can be
Love that.
difficult. That can be difficult. So we know this is not easy. Sitting with discomfort is probably one of the hardest things you can do. And yet, even if it's for two breaths, one breath, if it's one breath, start with that.
Hmm.
Just
I
and
love
go
I
on.
love that. I think we should let's all
Let's
all
do
just
that.
do a
Just
breath now
hand on your
together.
heart. It is so comforting. And take a nice deep breath. One breath is enough
Mm,
to calm you down. It really, really is. So
beautiful.
if rain is too much, feel your feet on the floor, put your hand on your heart, take a breath, and start notice, just be aware. I think it's an awareness, isn't it, Lisa, of gosh, I'm feeling really discombobulated, and our mind is spinning, and I've got to do this. Stop a moment and take one breath. Something may come to you and think, oh, you know what? I'm feeling really overwhelmed, or I'm feeling angry. It may come to you, it may not. And I think I love the word grace. Give yourself
Mm.
grace. Grace in grief is such an important thing to offer yourself. These are all invitations, as Lisa says, for you to learn that grief is more complex than you thought, that it's more challenging than you thought, and that you can have just simple tools like a breath and a hand on your heart. And that can just give you a little calm. And go with that. Go with that.
And I'm so reminded and encouraged to be able to do that. And because we do that, that's a remedy, that's an action, a gift we can give ourselves.
Hmm.
And as we're, sort of going to wrap up here in a few minutes, I want to turn our attention, because this is a point that comes up a lot, and has been something I've shared. I'm interested in your feedback as well. Is I think, the question comes, this is uh, such an easy thing to do. I mean, simple but not easy, to take a breath, to do the rain practice, to stop what I'm doing and say, what's going on with me and what do I need? The question becomes, why don't we do this? And the immediate answer that comes up when I ask myself that question is because like shines a light on me. It's sort of like I don't want to. I think the resistance and the reluctance is I'm scared. I'm scared to allow my feelings to show. They particularly in grief. I know that I've been scared of my own feelings. So why can others be scared too? So it's sort of feeling of like I don't want to show, it comes a cycle. I don't want to show myself because I'm scared. I don't want others to see how much pain I'm in because I might scare them away. Then I might really be by myself. And we can get to this pattern of really playing small. And this is a risk, Carol, that I ask you
Mm.
for your insights on because the risk is if our grief is something that prevents from showing up as ourselves, both when we're by ourselves, also when we're in the company of others. The risk is that we stop showing up as ourselves at all. And
Yeah.
that's not something that really happens overnight. But from my experience in my own grief and healing path, I know that early on as a young woman, as a young mom, I was definitely keep going, keep going, keep going. And what I didn't realize is that in my effort to keep going, whether it was becoming a peds ICU nurse or starting a coaching practice or working in corporate America, all those things, I was having to be different people in
In
different
different situations.
places because I had lost the ability to just be myself. I had put up so many barriers. Speaking of barriers to
Mhm.
healing, I had compartmentalized myself to such a degree that I became, first of all, flat, but also just exhausted. And that was really the impetus for starting to look at my own healing path and realizing, wow, if I can really fall into this unfortunate pattern, then anybody could fall into it. And that sort of became fuel for wanting to connect with. But what is your experience, both with yourself and your own healing and your clients, around this idea that we put barriers because we don't want to be seen or scared? And we sometimes are so scared, don't even want to take that because it's too overwhelming.
Oh, I resonate with all of that because I did that too. And we're both in a healthcare profession and we did it. So and
Right.
we know better, right? And so I think it always goes back to how things have been modeled. And I think as children, we're always told to be brave, to, don't cry, be a good girl, be brave, be a big boy, be strong. And so when it comes to feeling, I think we have almost lost the ability to feel. And then the idea of feeling the pain is just scary. As you said, it's overwhelming. It's like, I don't want to feel that. And the truth is, of course, we always shy away from pain. That's our natural instinct. So when you and I are saying, sit with that emotion or that pain, people are probably thinking, are you kidding? I don't want to do that. And I get that because we don't want to do it. And yet, the facade that we have to put on day in and day out of I'm fine, I'm doing really well, I'm so strong, yes I am, and going to work and doing all these things will burn you out. It burnt me out. I think it did for
Yes.
you.
Mhm.
And
Eventually.
it's yes, it took me 3 years for me. It took longer for you, but I realized I cannot keep going in pretending I'm okay and not feeling. And the flatness is a fascinating thing because when you're pushing down your grief, you're pushing down joy, you're pushing down everything.
Mm.
And so everything is flat. You don't feel so sad because you're pushing it away, but you also don't feel very happy. And you don't want to go on living like that. And it is scary. Yes, it is
And
scary
that's
to
that's
go
like a
in.
second really big risk of, not being able to find a way there in the feelings as overwhelming as they can be,
Mhm.
is that we then don't experience
We don't
anything.
feel. We
It
don't.
shut it all
Yeah.
down.
We shut it
Yeah.
all down. And I think that if you can remember that, if it seems scary, to, as you say, dip your toe in and do one breath of just, even if you don't say it initially, just say, I'm feeling a little off. Okay, don't name that you're fearful or
Mm.
scared. Just say, I'm just not quite feeling myself. Make it easy on yourself. But do go there in private if that's the most comfortable, because we're not comfortable showing our emotions and our feelings, and to people we're not.
Or
With
do go there with a trained professional, with a
Yes,
trusted friend, an
exactly.
advisor, someone that you feel
Safe
safe
with. It's
with.
safety.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
don't want to go through, particularly my daughter died when I was 27, and my son died on the day of his birth when I was 32, and I'm 55 now.
Wow.
Boy, I have a lot of life ahead of me, and to experience loss at a younger age, the risk of being able to become more of who we are, I feel strongly that it just robbed of my life. And let's be clear, having lost a daughter and a son, or my daughter and my son, I'm never going to live out my life the way they may have thought. However, I don't get to even become who I'm born to be. I strongly that I'm not the only one. I'm not the only casualty there. The world casualty, because
Yes.
you and I and our participants here with us and people that are listening and watching, we all have these seeds in us of who we're meant to become, gifts we can give the world, things that we have no idea are part of us.
Hmm.
And so when we hunker down and we shut down and we don't feel joy and we don't feel pain, and maybe we don't even can't show up anywhere as ourselves, and we're compartmentalized, as I was saying. I might as a younger person have thought, well, who cares, I'm never going to be right, I lost two children, so I'll just suck, and it is what it is. What I'm not realizing is there are things that the world needs me that I also can't show up with if I'm just kind of surrendering and saying, yeah, I'm not going to worry about how my body feels or what it's asking from me or these other physical barriers we talked about. I think everybody misses out. Could just be
Yeah.
could just my surviving and beautifully thriving
Family.
son,
Yeah.
or yeah, I mean, it's not the world even at large too. It's people around me that need me, that love me, and they deserve also to get the
The full
full
Lisa.
myriad of the full gamut of, the pain,
I think
the
that's a great
joy.
point, and I think that's something that we really don't think about, is not being able to offer who you are to the world, and we all have something to offer in some
Yes.
capacity, and grief can flatten you. It can. And so, as we're drawing to a close, remember, go back to self-care, go back to, don't create a physical barrier by not doing the self-care. Do the rest, do the nutrition, the hydration, the movement, the breath work.
And one, breath, again, it's
Breath,
a
one
way
breath.
to get to, we're having trouble hearing, adding on to your kind of summary of what we
Mm,
discussed. If we're not able to hear ourselves, and it's not something that's part of our regular practice of listening or being able to hear what we need, that one breath, hand on the heart, that compassionate, that graceful approach to bringing ourselves into a place where it's okay to feel what we're feeling. Another way to sharpen our senses as far as what we need and what we need to do to hear ourselves so that we can respond with what we both all kind of keep coming back to is
self-care.
self-care. So
Self-care, yes.
what a beautiful 30 minutes. I thank you, Carol, and
Thank
our other
you.
participants being here today. We will be coming back for our final live stream in this series, talking about our next chat, be about spiritual barriers and sort of some of our belief systems, and those can sometimes get away. I do want to share that if you're interested in the work Carol and I are doing, we're easily located. I myself am located or can be found at lisamcfarland.com. Carol Banens as well has a beautiful website featuring her work and her books and ways to connect with her as well. So thank you for being here today. And we just wish, healing and more grace, more compassion, more self-care as we continue on our journey. Thank you.
Thank
Namaste.
you.